Hello everyone, my name is Selena Mosley and on behalf of the organisers Oliver Kinross, I would like to welcome you all to London Build Online. I'd like to give a very big thanks to our sponsor of today's session, FlowForma. So today's session will kickstart with a presentation by our sponsor, followed by a discussion on how construction firms should prepare for the future of construction by adopting process automation, moderated by Ursula Cullen and joined by our expert lineup of panelists. There'll be plenty of time for Q&A throughout the session, so do take the opportunity to submit your questions in the questions box on your screen. Also, FlowForma have provided 3 handouts available for download in the control panel, also on your screen. So I hope you all enjoy the next 90 minutes, and I would now like to hand it over to Paul Stone.
Thank you. So today I'd like to kick us all off by just giving a brief introduction into the area that we'll be talking about and why process automation is now becoming a strategic imperative for construction companies. If you look at the construction landscape at the moment, you see a race to digitization. Every construction company is looking to see how can they go digital, how can they reap the benefit of productivity and the return on investment rewards that you can get from implementing digital solutions. But what you see at the moment is a myriad of solutions out there covering all sorts of specialist areas. BIM software, for example, 3D modeling, 4D modeling, and so on. Big data analytics is a major area. Looking at things like Internet of Things, building them into buildings to monitor the buildings and deal with maintenance, and QHSE, etc., etc., etc. There are so many solutions out there. And it's difficult with limited resources available to construction companies to actually implement all of these solutions and drive benefits out of them, right? Get return on investment. So putting the time in, putting the money in, and ultimately gaining the benefit is a difficult challenge for many construction companies. But one of the many technologies out there that's becoming increasingly prolific is process automation. That's an area that we FlowForma deal in. We're going to talk more about that today. But process automation is one technology that's increasingly a cloud-based technology. It's very easy to implement, very easy to get started, low level of investment and so on. And you can see the return on investment very quickly. It also helps knit together the investments you've made in other technologies as well. So process automation, in a sense, fits in very well with the message of digital transformation in construction. And it's a technology that, among others in the area, it's actually a very easy to implement and quick to get rewards. If you just switch on to the next slide there, Ursula. So one of the benefits of process automation is that, like I said, it knits together the other technologies. So it helps you to digitize your processes that may be running on paper. You may be integrating with a 3D modeling solution. You may be integrating with an IoT solution as well. But essentially, the process automation is driving the actual human activity on a project. And to do that, it's gathering data, which can be, of course, used for analytics. It's driving the workflow, driving the tasks within a process to achieve the goals in the business. And also, it's managing documentation and communications, so the communications are sent with the right information at the right time to the right people. And all of this is done via process automation solution. Now, you may not realize that process automation is actually quite easy to do with today's modern technology. And you can start to automate your processes very quickly. Typically, you can automate a process within a kind of a 6-week time frame and start seeing that immediate return on investment. Also, it helps to communicate between all the different parties involved, regardless of where they are. So you might have people in head office, you might have people working on site, you might have your suppliers, you might have your clients. All of these people can be involved in your process to achieve your business goals, getting those goals achieved. And all that information then is tracked and that allows you to basically monitor what's going on. So this is an example of what process automation can bring to the table. As I said, there are many components to it. We'll be talking a lot more about that today, different types of solutions, and each of these solutions bring the benefits and it can all be integrated together. And I'm sure we'll have a great discussion on that. At the end of the day, the benefits are very real. So you can improve your data quality, you can improve your productivity. And again, we'll be discussing that and many real examples of that in practice. So without further ado, I think we'll move on to our main discussion. And maybe Ursula, if I could pass back to you to to drive our
Great.
panel.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Paul. Really appreciate it. And I hope that gave everyone listening an insight into what our panel is going to discuss today. So a real focus around digitization and process automation. As we know, this is a key area where a lot of construction organizations struggle to kick off a project or identify certain challenges around process automation and technology in their organization too. So thank you for that, Paul. And before we get into our panel discussion, I just want to thank Paul and you for joining today. So Paul Stone is the product strategist at FlowForma. So he is joining from a FlowForma perspective, but we also have two really exciting panelists as well joining. So I would like to thank Lubomir Popov, who is the BIM Digital Construction Manager at Sir Robert McAlpine. So thank you for joining us today, Lubomir, and also to Kai Nelson. Kai is the Digital Construction Lead at AECOM. So I think between our three panelists, we're going to have some really exciting conversations. So looking forward to diving right in and getting stuck in. And if people do have any questions along the way, definitely pop them into the chat box or the question box, as Selena mentioned, and we will answer these at the end and try to cover as many as we can throughout. So I think we'll get right in if everyone is ready to go. So what we have is we have 7 quite broad questions coming up, which I'm going to pose to each of our panelists to discuss and share their insights and opinions and any tricks or tips they have to share with other organizations out there. So to kick off, I think we'll jump straight into topic 1. So topic 1 is all around process trends for construction in 2022. So across the globe, construction organizations are rapidly looking to digitize. I think we know that as a fact, as so many processes are manual, paper or email based. And I really think that's becoming a thing of a past. But Paul, why don't we go to you first to kick off the conversation? So maybe you can start by sharing what trends you think people are going to see for the remainder of 2022 and beyond in terms of organizations digitizing and process automation trends.
Yeah, I think for the construction industry, we've certainly seen a big pickup in interest in process automation. As I said earlier on, it's a bit of a race to digitalization, and process automation seems to be rising up the agenda. And the reason for that, I feel, is that people have seen solid results coming out of process automation. So we look at projects big and small, each one has an opportunity to digitize processes, and by digitizing processes, you get a very obvious end result. I think that's one of the great things about that, because you can quickly see just how much kind of time and money you're saving through digitization, and this helps drive further digital transformation in your company. So process automation, because of that kind of increased visibility, if you like, I think is rising up the agenda in terms of the priorities for construction companies. Now, I'm not saying it's the only technology out there. There are others as well, of course, but it's certainly a hot topic, if you like, in construction companies at the moment. And we've seen that in a number of clients, as I said, at all different sizes, from very large civil projects across the world, down to home builders, etc., smaller construction companies, specialist construction companies, and so on. Pretty much everybody is finding that digital process automation is something that is driving some key benefits for them. I wonder, would anybody else in the panel like to add their comments on that?
Want to go first, Lubomir?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. I do think construction is kind of catching up, but there's still a long way to go. In terms of trends, I think there's a real move towards like cloud kind of online solutions, and that's obviously pushed by both the vendors and sort of companies seeking to go with sort of integrated all-in-one solutions. The effect of that is, they're often quite expensive, I think, but it seems to be, you've got to pay to get the benefits. So there's not much choice in it really. You've got to pick your battles, and at the moment, I think adoption is kind of more important, which is definitely increased. So in terms of digital engineering, you know, most construction firms kind of have a digital engineering department. Some, you know, there's less people in maybe not every project, and then others kind of are going all the way, and it's kind of by default. And I think that's what clients are expecting now, at least big sort of government clients. You know, you see it in the scopes, you see it in the tender questions. You know, they want to know that this is what you do all the time. Although kind of on the ground, it's easier said than done. You know, there's a lot of blockers in terms of the frameworks that we operate within, the way economics are kind of put together on construction projects. So it's a real battle. We also have problems with kind of training and retaining staff with digital skill sets. It's difficult to also identify, you know, where the gaps are, who are the people that are fantastic with Excel, who are the ones that want to go further, who are the ones that, you know, are struggling with email. It's an ongoing kind of battle, and things like apprenticeships and you know, the education around BIM and kind of digital approaches within universities. I know it's increasing, but it's sort of a slow, long journey. But we seem to be leading the way in the UK. At least that's my impression. There are other kind of areas, countries, Middle East and whatnot, that are pretty high up there. But yeah, I think we're doing all right. I know what your impression is.
Yeah. I want to highlight something that you, Paul, and Kai mentioned, and it's this the client involvement. As time goes on and as more and more processes get embedded within the company, construction companies, design companies, clients are starting to ask about it. They're starting to see the value in this, and they're starting to request this. And in my opinion, going forward, this will be a trend that will be only increasing. And in terms of other trends, I think project members upskilling is something that's picking up also. You mentioned, Kai, about apprenticeships, and that's very much viable. I myself was part of such an apprenticeship, and the beautiful thing about this is process automation is applicable to every role. Every member on the project can find something that can improve their day-to-day workflows using process automations and low code. And that's the beauty of it, is you don't have to be a computer scientist to create small sort of improvements to your day-to-day. I mean, even email categorization is a form of automation of a process. So it's something that will be more and more present in our day-to-day work life.
The mindset change.
Yeah, can I say I've also seen that, and we deal with clients all around the world, and I think you're absolutely right, Kai, in saying UK is quite a leader. It is a leader, and it seemed to be a leader by people in other geographies, and definitely in terms of the digital skill set in the construction workers, I get what you're saying. It's a slow process and everything to get people upskilled, but it definitely is happening, and it's happening at pace, and certainly some of the larger players in the market are coming up with their own training programs. I think that when you were just talking about that, their own training programs to get people, you know, skilled appropriately in digital skills. It really is definitely a trend, if you like, in the market that people are upskilling across the board. But I appreciate what you're saying, Kai. It might take a little bit of time.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's important to note that everybody is aware of the benefits, that they are interested in it, and it's important to also just serve as a guide to how it can be implemented and how anyone can benefit. But it's a good sign that more and more people are starting to ask about it and inquire more about it.
Thanks, guys. Lubomir, I thought it was really interesting there where you mentioned about low code and no code. And I think that's probably something that is quite interesting to new hires, knowing that they don't have to have that CS background or development background, and that they can, as you said, improve their processes or their day-to-day lives themselves. Do you find that the no code route is trending for 2022? Do you think people are going to go down that route instead of having to hire those additional developers or people that understand that code?
I don't think so. Even in our company, I've introduced a number of our team members to some simple applications that we have that allow to gather very quickly a categorized set of information that can then be used. So we move from pen and paper of having to copy this from paper to an Excel to God knows where later on, to actually a structured form and structured information that can then we can actually start to analyze and start to derive further information going forward. For example, in our case, we used it for tracking of engineers on site and engineers working from home. Instead of having to sign in on a piece of paper when you go in before the actual gates are set up, there is a form that you can simply scan and submit. And this is a very simple way of just digitizing something that is very simple and can gather a lot of good information.
Great. I think that mention of paper as well goes back to what you mentioned, Kai, around the cost of these cloud services. And I suppose a lot of organizations probably don't take into account the costs of manual processes and the cost of paper and transferring paper throughout sites or back to head offices. And I know when you look at a cloud solution online, I'm sure the figure, the amount can be daunting, but I'm sure those organizations haven't been evaluating the cost of manual either. So I don't know, maybe if that's something, guys, that you think people are going to start looking at going into the future, is what are they spending in terms of manual and what will they be saving in terms of automated?
I think they're definitely looking at it and they're taking it into account. It's just kind of when you deploy it, it's difficult to show the ROI. It's what I've always encountered, that you deploy the solution, people say it's great, you try and quantify it, and often you almost feel like you're making it up, but you're not. It's just it's difficult to measure. Bit of an issue with construction process and process improvement in general. You're kind of having to bend backwards to demonstrate the improvement. And so I think it can be helpful in that case to get like the qualitative kind of assessment, talk to people and get quotes and pull together sort of user feedback, and then go with that and say, look, everybody, they love it, they're telling us it's saving them time. And then you can kind of not make something up, but you can kind of pull together a coherent and credible argument for why we should stick with it, or why it needs to be improved, and then you can kind of engage with vendors and try and improve things. But yeah, it's an incremental process, so it takes time. Like we said, everything takes a lot of time.
And the weight of the transition is very much at the beginning of the process. It's an exponential curve at the beginning. It's very hard to start off with this at the beginning, but then as time goes on and the implementation gets into the fabric, it gets better and better. And these sort of ROIs, as you mentioned, Kai, are only increasing as the sort of the hardness of this implementation wears off.
Yeah, I think like from our perspective, for sure, the first process you automate, the first thing you do basically is always the hardest thing. And then it just gets easier and easier. And it's exactly what you said, Lubomir. It's like once it gets into the fabric of the organization, people, there's enough people around who are trained in it, they help each other, and you can then accelerate it. And I think from a measurement perspective, I totally get what you're saying there, Kai. And I think it helps if the system kind of tracks what the activity in the organization. So you can track the activity and actually measure the improvement over time and report on that through the tracking within the system itself. And I think that can really help. But 100%, I think at the end of the day, you only get further funding, if you like, to further transform your business if you can measure and show benefits. So it's so important. Absolutely, you have to keep measuring and showing the benefit all the way along.
Doesn't have to be exact either. I
Yeah,
found
yeah,
that, you know, you can kind of make estimates and kind of come up with averages and
yeah.
use that to guide the thinking and not get too bogged down on, did I save 3 minutes? Did I save an hour? You know, it's okay, well, it's something between there. So maybe half an hour each time. Let's err on the
Yeah.
side of caution, take away 20%. So
It's
there's
about twice as fast. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
It's about the compounding effect as well.
Mm.
Just you build from small, but as time goes on, this sort of months and months and months, because it's set up, the process is there, it's automated. You don't need to modify it, and the benefits just keep on compounding, really.
Yeah, it's just scaling, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially when
Yeah.
it deals with a lot of people in your organization that are kind of pinging things back and forth from one another. It's like a domino effect, exponential. That's the one.
Yeah, exactly.
Great, thanks guys. So we'll move on to topic 2, and I know some of the areas that we might have touched on there. I think we're probably going to deep dive a little bit further, but if anyone does have questions along the way, feel free to pop them in. If you need further explanation or if you have any questions, that's no problem. But for now, we'll move on to topic 2, which is around common construction challenges and how to face them. And I suppose the point of this topic is for us to put ourselves into the perspective of the individual who is looking to kickstart digital transformation now, and what are the challenges they need to be looking at, or what are the common challenges, I suppose. Maybe we could share some insights into, look, it might seem daunting and scary at the moment, but these are how you can overcome some of these challenges. So Lubomir, we might kick off with you for this one, and how would you advise that individual to address challenges, and do you think there's any job titles or particular departments that should head up these particular challenges?
I think step number 1 would be to understand what sort of tasks can be automated that we are facing, what sort of role that we have, and what is it that is repetitive in our day-to-day work, and how can we address that, and how can we improve upon it. And another thing I would say is just reach out to the community, outside, inside. There's the problems that you're facing, that you might potentially be facing, are not new. There is plenty of people out there asking themselves, how can they automate what they have, how can they improve, so that they have more time to address problems that require their expertise, that require their really what they are for, and not only copying from Excel to Excel and changing formatting. So I think reaching out to external sources, reaching out to people within the company. There are plenty of people keen to expand on their knowledge about automation and about improvements that can be done. And there is an untapped, I think, potential within each company that just needs to be uncovered and build up from the ground up to the board level.
Yeah, I think I'd add there that basically a lot of our customers tend to come to us with individual small problems. So they'll come along and they'll have one particular problem that's a pain point for them, and they'll want us to prove a solution for that problem. So we have to put together a business case to show them that, hey, you know what, if you automate this process, you're going to save a certain amount of money. And then that's used to present to an approver, a board member, whatever, to gain support for the initiative, and then they kick off the initiative, and then it gets going, and it solves that one problem. So everybody tends to most people tend to start off with one problem. You get a few people who are enlightened, and they actually say, well, you know what, this needs to be done on a scale right from the get-go, and we want to do this in a big way. And that's a different kind of a justification that you're putting together. But most people come along with one problem, and they look for a solution to that. And then the idea is you get that, like what we always propose, is that you get that solution in place as quickly as possible, and you get it adopted, because as soon as it's adopted, then you can start measuring the return that you're going to get from that implementation. And then you're using that return to justify further investments. And hopefully through word of mouth, you're promoting the whole idea of digitization inside the organization, because like Kai was saying earlier on, the digital skill set varies across the workforce, and you have to get people infused about digitization and about the benefits it could bring and so on. You have to start somewhere. So I think in terms of like common construction challenges, if you were to ask me, well, do construction companies come along to you with the same problem every time? And the answer is definitely no. It's a different problem on different projects, right? And different construction companies, different projects have different gaps in their different challenges, different gaps. So what I'd say is that everybody comes along with a slightly different problem, but you do need to kind of tackle that one big pain point that they have, and then hopefully that will generate some head of steam, get the snowball rolling, and get people to start digitizing more at scale. But I think we look there at common construction challenges. I think the common construction challenge is simply that construction companies in general haven't digitized enough. They haven't digitized the processes typically. So that's the common challenge. But when you look down at each individual company, they always kind of start off at a different place. You can see some areas, by the way, that are fairly common. Like you see, like contractor onboarding seems to be a pretty common problem. Labor requisition, materials requisition, supply chain. You can kind of see some commonality, right? But you tend to have to get it right at a detail level first time round, and then use that measured return to actually generate some momentum within the company to digitize at a broader scale. So if that was too off topic or not.
No, it's all on topic. From my perspective, I think we've kind of mentioned it, but the IT skills, I think that's the big thing, especially in like main contracting in construction organizations. I think it's slightly better, or my experience has been it's slightly better sort of in engineering and design, just because the fact that someone doing calculations or whatnot is obviously going to have to use sort of modeling software or Excel for calculations and the like. So within a construction organization, it's really kind of engaging with your staff and figuring out what are their levels, what is their comfort zone, and how you can support them and engage with them to upskill, and accepting that there'll always be some people that are like, look, I'm at the end of my career, I'm just not really interested. So having a place for them, and then also having room or creating space for younger people that might be more keen and looking forward to all the possibilities, and giving them space and scope to kind of innovate and try new things and fail or find things that work, and kind of learning from that. So creating that environment, that culture, I think is quite difficult, especially within construction projects where it's a very high pressure environment. At least that was my experience. You're always worried about money and program and kind of where are we, where are you, what are you doing, that sort of thing. So yeah, that whole people aspect, the change management, that's really important. Engaging with your staff, understanding their problems and speaking to them from a place of empathy, realizing that just coming in and asking someone to do something different, which is it kind of leads into the who are heading this up. I find a lot of the time the expectation is, oh, you're the digital engineer, you're meant to be digitizing the project, off you go.
It's your problem.
Tell everybody what they need to do. But often if you just go out and say to someone, look, I want you to do something different, that's not going to work. You have to speak to their issues. What's holding you up, what do you spend time on all day that you would rather not be doing or spending as much time on? Or hey, we want to collect this data to look at the operations of the project across our sector or across the entire business. We want timely information to make good decisions. We want you to be a part of that. It creates a better environment for everybody, because you're not pointing your fingers at others and you're not looking for things that when they're lost. So that's sort of the way, I would advise is the way to engage with people. and then listen to them when they have objections as well. You know, take them to heart, because often I found that the objections kind of, there's always a nugget to them, no matter how absurd they might seem. You know, they're not always absurd, but sometimes, you know, you go, oh, okay, there's a reason behind this, and they're the ones doing the work. So there's some wisdom in listening to them and trying to figure out why they have the view they do, and that will lead you to a better solution in the end. And then the last point, I think, is trying to make people self-reliant, not just showing them one thing, but teaching them kind of the principles, you know. So in terms of process automation, it's like, how do I approach this? Like, have you ever created a process diagram? Do you understand like the flow? And, you know, give them confidence that when they do it, that, hey, you don't have to get it 100% right. You just got to put it on a piece of paper and we can look at it, or, you know, maybe it'll become clear after you do that, and you'll know how to solve it on your own. You know, they become self-sufficient. So like the teach a man to fish and he'll eat forever sort of thing, and not just swooping in and being the hero and solving their problem for them.
Some good points about the change of culture and listening to issues staff can have in regards to automation, which then begs also the question: who do they go to when they have such objections, or who is the actual person who proposes or highlights that there are other ways to do the things that they're doing that could help us going forward? And that ties into, Ursula, your question about specific staff on projects that could be helpful. And it's a question of, do projects have a project analyst on the projects that can deal with this sort of information management and process setup for the project? Is it something that they create from scratch on that project and get scaled up to a company-wide process, which is something that I think is very important, is the notion of scalability of these solutions. It needs to be something that, ideally, obviously it's not always the case, it can be reused in the future. And this is where the little problems with construction comes in, is, as you guys mentioned, each project has its own peculiarities. It's hard to automate on a larger scale from the get-go. So we need to start small, as you said, Paul, and start with the problem. Then suddenly we figure out that there are many projects that have the same problem, so we can scale the solution. And then we move on to suddenly, we can also solve this, we can also solve that. So there is a snowball effect that starts really with one simple problem.
Yeah, I think that snowball effect is really important, and I think that's something that I think you've all have mentioned as well, which is interesting. So, Paul, I don't know, were you about to add something additional there?
No, I was just going to give a case study, Ursula, if we have time.
Oh yeah, we love to hear like real life examples, and I think sometimes it's nice to hear that people might have similar problems and how they might have made those mistakes or made the right choices and progressed with process automation. So fire ahead.
No, it was just in relation to the things that Kai and Ruben were saying, that one of our past clients was actually still a current client, was the A14, a smart motorway project, and they implemented a solution for parent to dig. But it was their first big solution that they implemented, the first big process automation solution. And they faced a big problem with digital skills. So it took a long time to get that adopted. But the way they did it was they ground down people. So basically, they pushed out a draft solution, just like Kai was saying, just pushed out a draft solution and then got feedback from the workforce. And the feedback from the workforce was niggly little problems that you might, as an IT person, you might look at this and say, oh, that's just a little name on a field. What does that matter? Well, it mattered to them. And the way to win people over was to make fixes quickly. So if there were little problems, well, they might have seemed trivial. It made all the world of a difference to the people actually using the system and making quick changes and showing them, oh yes, we've listened to you, we've responded, we've fixed this, we've changed it. really helped get the system adopted by the workforce. And ultimately, that project was a very big success. But yeah, it just, in the real world, definitely small things matter to the workforce. And if you're trying to get people to adopt your system, you definitely have to listen to them and accept the fact that something that seems trivial to you is actually very important to them.
Thanks, Paul. So I think from listening to you all there, what I have taken away anyway, is that every organization is really different, and I think you're all in agreement that you need to listen to your people. And Paul, I know you gave an example there of one organization, but that doesn't mean every organization will be the same. But the key part of that is the involvement of your staff and your colleagues, and giving that feedback and understanding their needs. And Lubomir, I think you mentioned speaking to others inside of the community. I think that's a really key point as well, because the construction industry is really taking on process automation and digitization as a whole. You know, there are a lot of people in the same boat, and I'm sure some people are afraid they might be lagging behind, or people are scaling ahead. But I think that's a great point, to talk to your peers and network and understand, you know, what's going on. And I suppose hopefully today we're sharing some feedback to our peers too, and advice as well. But yeah, thank you so much for that, guys. Really enjoyed that piece there. If it's okay, we'll move on to topic 3 now. Topic 3 is really about empowering digital adoption, but we've kind of briefly covered that there in the last topic. But Kai, is there anything else you want to add around empowering user adoption? I know you spoke about showing the benefits to the people in your organization, but are there any other key points that you'd like to share before we move on?
Yeah, I think one of the things is getting it right, which is, you know, kind of a bit vague, but I mean creating like lasting change, and that ties back a bit to who do you engage with. Personally, I found when teams, so individuals, take ownership of, you know, automation and digitalization, you do get a lot more traction, because they can more readily solve their problems than you kind of swooping in and trying to solve them for them. So I've always found that to be more effective in my experience. I also think that despite the perception that construction is behind, that there is a lot of you said acceleration, but that I think people are really willing to change as long as it works for them. So like always engaging with them about you know, the time savings. And I find personally, like the waste topic, you know, everybody is pretty keen to reduce waste. So if you frame any sort of change around that tends to get really good engagement. I'd also mention keeping your expectations realistic. You know, don't boil the ocean. Don't expect everything to change overnight. Accept that you're on a journey, and that, you know, now we're at A and one day you'll be at X, but kind of we don't really know, and we can't get too discouraged by where we think we are now in comparison to where, you know, you think we should be. So that helps me anyway, just staying positive about the right things. Yeah, and the rest, I guess, is the, you know, keeping people on side. And I think all of those points are kind of part of that. Yeah, being realistic and working with others constantly to ensure that they're just on the right path, but not necessarily kind of telling them what they should or shouldn't be doing. That's a good way to approach it.
Right. Would anyone else like to add anything there to Kai?
I tend to agree with Kai about the positive sort of attitude it can do. I think it's very easy for someone to mirror a positive approach if we ourselves presented with the belief and the positivity that it, in my opinion, deserves. As mentioned also before, it's about listening to concerns and showing the positive impact that it can have. It's a very interesting point about waste and framing the automation process about reducing waste, because we are reducing it. We are reducing the wasting of our time, and that's has a powerful message to everybody, because that means that we focus on things that actually matter to us and matter to the role that we are doing, and we're cutting off time that can be taken up by the computers, really. There's the processes and work that we don't need to do. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think the point that was made at the start about, you need to encourage ownership. So I think once you encourage ownership in the workforce, they basically have more responsibility. They have a feeling of better reward. So if you can actually get people to own the digital solutions, so that they're not residing in the IT department, they're actually owned by the people who are using those solutions in the field, that really helps a lot. And that's something that we try to do in terms of our automation product is, we make it so that you don't need a lot of IT skills, or any IT skills, in fact, to build out solutions. And the whole point of that is really to get people to own those solutions themselves. So those people out in the workforce, they actually know best what the process should be. They know how to build that bridge. So they're the best people to actually build out solutions, and it's their teams that use it. So it's their team adopting their process. So it just helps a lot with the whole digital adoption thing. So I think encouraging ownership is a really strong way of getting people to adopt the solutions, and getting people to generate value out of those solutions as well. And I have to say, I'll just make a small plug there about FlowForma. That's what we're all about, because we're trying to enable those people in the workforce to actually just do just that, to not be so dependent on IT and dependent on third-party resources to actually build things. Why? Because ultimately they can own them, and ultimately, if you own something, you're going to want it to succeed, and therefore, you'll get the maximum benefit out of it.
And it also builds confidence for going forward as well, which is a sort of self-feeding loop. You start with something small, you succeed, you start to scale it. It gives you confidence to look for further problems. You start to automate also. It's a positive feedback loop, which is always good.
Great. Yeah, I think that is a really key point, Lubomir, around the knock-on effect, and probably a lot of departments as well see other departments doing something slightly different and get a little bit inspired, maybe a little bit jealous of their free time they have thanks to automation. But yeah, so I think that is great. And I think being really open with the challenges and open with the changes as well, and how, and as you said, Kai, not being too particular with actual timings or actual savings, and just proving the benefits as a whole. It doesn't really, a benefit doesn't always have to be a time saved or an hour saved or money saved, but it can be, your life is a little bit easier just because you don't have to fill out so many admin forms or paperwork. So yeah, I think that there's some really great points, guys. So thanks so much. So our next topic then, just flick on to the next slide, is all around improving productivity. So productivity, I suppose, is a trending topic in construction in itself. And Kai, I know you mentioned there a minute ago, understanding where everyone is and knowing what's going on. But now that, I think that's the whole point of digital, is that, you're removing those manual forms, you're removing those Excel spreadsheets, which can in turn, empower productivity. But are there any other ways, Lubomir, that you might want to highlight of how process automation or digital transformation can actually improve productivity, where if it's on site or inside of headquarter? Any thoughts on that?
For me personally, from my experience, productivity is linked to communication, communication between people, but communication between people and systems as well. And process automations reduce human error, or at least the risk of human error. And I think this is a very powerful concept, because then that by the time we try to reach a certain information, we know that it has been checked, it is accurate, and there is no need to further dwell into it. We actually can see the core values. And the other thing is the time in which that information travels. Giving an example, if we would have a health and safety manager on site writing down the risks for the different areas to notify the workforce, this would currently involve having an Excel, writing it down, processing, emailing, perhaps there's. But what we have tried at SRM is having this information inputted into a low-code, no-code hub developed. This information gets inputted by the health and safety manager as he goes around the site. This information, again, automatically it is structured because there's a specific form around it. Then this information is sent over to the project BIM manager, who automatically can upload the models to the cloud. And then this information is immediately available to everybody on site. So from the moment of capturing the data to the moment of it being informed, we have a process of 5 to 10 minutes instead of perhaps a day or two. So there are already small changes that can have real impact, even in such areas as health and safety. But that is just one example of many.
That's the waste reduction thing, really, isn't it? Because someone's not waiting, or you're not just delivering something to somebody that's not ready for it. So kind of ties in those sort of things. I have some points. I think moving away from email and Excel really is the way we need to go. I'm not sure how we get there exactly. It's a really sticky problem in construction, but I think we are moving in the right direction. I know all the big players sort of here in the UK are moving towards these data-centric approaches, but I do know that because it's quite difficult, and the shortage of the people to support these sorts of initiatives, that a lot of times the focus is more on the back end, so on operations, things like finance and HR and general kind of project reporting, and then on the coalface, so on the projects, then you might have the ambition and the initiative and even the funding, but then you just can't get hold of the right person within the business to actually support what you're trying to do. So programmers and coders, and we've talked about that. I know the FlowForma solution is sort of a no-code, so that's kind of at one end, but obviously isn't appropriate for all types of processes, but good for a lot of paper-based ones, I suppose. But yeah, in the past I've tried to kind of create scalable process automation. So on a project, how can we upload the data to a central spot, and then can we make that scalable, so adopted on other projects? But that can often be really difficult because you go to the other team and they've got slightly different priorities, and they've got different kind of tools and processes. And as we pick up digitalization, which goes in the right direction, I'm finding there's a lot of platforms and tools, and they don't really talk to one another, not easily anyway. And so trying to jump from one system to another is often almost impossible. So we're sort of scrambling to come up with other ways to achieve what we want, and that's, I think, why we're always going back to things like Excel and CSVs and SharePoints and this sort of thing, because we can't kind of stuck with it for now. And hopefully it becomes more open and the tools get more sophisticated and we can sort of move beyond that. But unfortunately, we're kind of stuck in this ecosystem right now, and we just got to make the best of it.
I think just to note on these different tools not talking to each other, I think that as an industry, in an ideal world, we would move away from tool-led projecting to actual data-centric projecting, because I think when we achieve finally that the tools themselves will not be such an obstacle themselves, because we are sending an information to them rather than them generating the information from us. That's a big leap forward, but to truly be able to scale at the largest level, let's say automation, I think this is where the industry will need to shift. And I think there are small steps being taken. This discussion happening and all around different initiatives being done to move towards data-centric projecting. But it's very time-consuming process, and it's a very slow, and the biggest obstacle, I believe, is again, each project is very different and has different obstacles, and it very much starts with the client requirements. I think this in a lot of situations, this is the stopping stone of a lot of good things that are developed. As you mentioned, Kai, you reach out to other teams, they have different priorities. These are usually led by financial incentives or program incentives. So the more and more clients get educated and then reach out to the professionals within the industry, construction companies, design consultants, things will be changing fast, I think.
Yeah, I think like in terms of site operations, absolutely at the coalface, you find the hardest challenge. And I think definitely you see programs that are focused in on the back office systems, the HR systems, the finance and so on. And that's actually relatively easy to do. It's that the on-site processes are the toughest challenge. And at the moment, I see a whole variety of systems out there, lots of different systems used by different people, and with the same company on different projects, they have different systems. And so it's a really confusing landscape out there. I think what we bring to the table is an ability to have a kind of a standardized interface that you can reuse in different projects, and we'll talk about that a bit more later on. But I think that's the critical thing, is to have this kind of common understanding across the projects and a common collection of data, so that all that data can be consolidated at the end of the day into one large data warehouse that you can, or data lake that you can analyze and use constructively and feed back straight out to the project, so that the project gets data in near real time and they can act on it, make decisions based on it. I think that's the ultimate goal. But like the panelists said, it's not easy one to achieve. It's a longer road, but certainly a road that people are going down right now, and they're finding solutions for it. So I do like Ludmila's point about the fact that, down the line, it's ultimately the data that you're collecting that's driving the decisions. So that data should be the target to aim for, to get all the data through whatever systems you want to use out there on site to gather it. Yeah, I totally relate to that. And at the end of the day, gathering the data lets people make better decisions, which ultimately improves that productivity. So I would add just to say, just add on to that to say that while data is very important, there is process around that as well. Processes out there that have to be executed, have to be run efficiently, and those processes are gathering the data that feed into those ultimately decision-making tools, analytics.
Yes, Paul, you're absolutely right. Data is nothing without a properly set up process around them that just unwraps and feeds the correct information to the people that need to see it at the right time. And that again is key, because then we have data-driven decisions, and it's very hard to argue with data-driven facts.
Yeah.
It removes all sorts of emotions, or I think, or maybe we should. It looks at the cold facts, and again, it is what you see on the screen, really.
That's sort of the promise of BIM, I suppose, though. It's looking beyond kind of just data and starting to think about what it's useful for. That's why it's called information. It has a purpose. And really, or another kind of issue we're having is the amount of data is just getting too big. It's so easy to provide more than what's necessary and then have just a mess that you can't make sense of. So that's quite important, that you're only collecting the sort of things that are useful, you know, have value, and you know clearly how to use that information to towards a desired outcome.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to mention that just on Kai's point about a large amount of data. There was an article I read in Forbes that the companies have around 80 to 90% of their data unstructured, which essentially means data that does not provide insight to the project team members or board stakeholders. So there really is a large pool of information that companies possess currently that could help them benefit financially or administratively, and it just needs to be this first step just needs to be taken.
And I was going to throw in a complete segue now to just confuse everybody, and a bit of knowledge I picked up from working in oil and gas many years ago, that out in the North Sea, there's many oil rigs, and many oil rigs are plastered with IoT devices, gathering vast quantities of data, but nobody knows what to do with it. So basically, it was a lot of information, but nobody knew how to find insights out of it that would actually mean anything. So they were kind of one step forward, but there was much more to do to actually gain value from all that data. And I think that's a key thing that people need to consider as well, that you need to gather the right data at the right time to make the right decisions. So it's not just gathering data for data's sake. Got to do it for a purpose.
Absolutely. And we are reverting back to this notion of upskilling and the awareness that there is data from different project team members, different stakeholders, that there is this world of data, and the willingness to upskill and to develop processes around that. Where there's willingness, there's a way.
Thanks, guys. So our next topic is actually around data. So you guys are just on the ball. But look, I think that it's still, I think there's still a lot, like we could probably do a full 90-minute session on data in its entirety. But I know you guys have been talking about the importance of data, but maybe, Kai, if you want to kick off here, feel free. But how do you think organizations can kind of realize the benefits of that data? Like, what tricks or tips would you share? As we said, there's so much data out there, so much data available, but how do you really knuckle down into what areas that you can benefit or make improvements to future projects or empower other users or other departments?
I mean, within ACOM, we've actually just recently launched like a data academy. So we're kind of training our staff and investing in our staff to help them understand and use data better. I think a trend in the industry as well has been, obviously, like tools like Power BI have been kind of fantastic because it's democratized sort of analytics and whatever that used to be gated behind quite high license fees for sort of competing products, and now for free almost you can pick up this tool and you can stick it in Excel and you can get an insight, and then you go, oh, hang on, like we could do this in a much larger scale. So I think that really brings to life sort of the benefits, and then you find you kind of train people on a project and you come back to them in a year and they're dashboarding the hell out of everything, and that's really good to see. So I think that's been a fantastic way of using it. In terms of benefits, it's obviously, the visibility, kind of what's going on, understanding more deeply, kind of what's happening. Although, you've always got to be careful with sort of data points and analytics, that sometimes it can kind of not be showing you the full picture. So you always have to keep in the back of your head the sort of the nuance, the depth to what you're looking at, and kind of be, I guess the term is agile. It's a bit kitschy, but adapting to what you've got and trying to not just reduce numbers, like look at it as a KPI issue, but instead kind of dig a bit deeper. So yeah, the benefit then would be better decision making, which we've kind of talked a lot about. But obviously health and safety, kind of quality management, bringing out sort of issues of compliance, these sorts of insights that kind of analytics can give you at a high level. It can help you find where to look. But yeah, you have to, you shouldn't just look at the Power BI dashboard and go, this is what it is. It's like you've got to use it as a guide to dig a bit deeper and then find out the full story. And in that way, I think you can kind of have a continuous improvement cycle. So, there's the PDCA that people know, and it's really the analytics is like the study or the learning part. So you can go back to the beginning and kind of take action and improve what you're doing. And in that way, you're on the trajectory to realize benefits.
Yeah. So I can relate to the very much to the dashboarding. It's just dashboards everywhere. It's very easy to get lost in this data that we have, and I started to call it death by dashboards, by 1,000 dashboards. And it's very important in this point to have a structure within the company, a framework that sets out how this data can be used, which data can be used, because the more and more data we gather from different locations, be it third-party services or within the company, cybersecurity is very important. So it's very important how the company will set out the access to this information for people to be able to create insight from them. And I think it all starts with analyzing what we have and what has happened, and then moving on to what is happening and why is it happening, to then be able to go into the insight of what will happen based on the trends. And I think currently as an industry we are getting pretty good at getting to understand what is happening and why it's happening, and that links to Kai's arguments about understanding the data that we are working with. So it's, yeah, as we mentioned also, it can be a 90 minutes just talking about the data, but it's important not to get lost in the sheer amount of it, because it really is an enormous set of information that we have access for, open source and from within the company. But this just structuring it into small steps definitely helps to overcome that.
Yeah, I think decision making based on real-time analytics is very attractive. I mean, everybody can get it really quickly, and it's very, very powerful and reap real benefits. But it's just going back to the points made by other panelists that it's garbage in, garbage out. At the end of the day, unless the quality of the data is good coming into those analytics, and unless the relevance of that data is good, then it's not much value in terms of being used to make decisions, because the data basically, for whatever reason, is not very important. And I do go back and say, listen, from a data value perspective, if you can tie the data into those business processes being executed in the company, because the business processes themselves are all related to the achievement of business goals, by definition, the data in relation to those processes is more important. So I would say that information can give some structure and value to the data, and maybe prioritize it and help people use it better in their analytics tools. Okay, so it's just something I'd add in there, but otherwise, I think the points raised by Kai and the Lugamu there were spot on.
I have a tip for people. I'll just plug in here that always be mindful, like when you're collecting sort of a data point or a KPI or whatever it is around, what are you measuring? Are you measuring sort of the input or the output? I think the terminology is like a leading or lagging indicator. And it's quite important because numbers can be manipulated and people will behave in a way to achieve a certain outcome if they're just looking at the number. And so you've got to observe what you're actually measuring. Are you measuring the outcome, or are you just measuring a number? So that's quite important. And if you're someone working on kind of dashboards and data analytics, I think it's something that you should go down the rabbit hole a bit, do a bit of a search on Google, and you can find some really good examples, especially outside other sectors such as IT and software development, that have been working with this sort of technology for a lot longer than us in construction. So that's a really important tip I'd recommend people look into.
Thanks, Kai. Thanks very much, guys. I'm sure we'll have a couple of questions on data as well, so we might even come back to it in the Q&A section at the end. But moving on to our next topic around customer experience with process automation. So I suppose this is something we haven't really touched on yet, which is nice. You guys are always ahead of me. But yeah, so what I wanted to kind of uncover here is, Paul, in your opinion, how can process automation technologies improve customer experiences? And I suppose the reason for this question is that, you know, at the moment for contracting businesses to deliver great customer experience is quite a high priority, I believe, and customers are demanding, you know, ever faster project timelines, cheaper projects, quicker deadlines, all of that. So how can process automation work hand in hand with improving customer experience, Paul?
Yeah, I actually don't think customer experience was high on the agenda for construction companies, and probably still is not. But I think it is definitely rising up the agenda. And in the past, quite naturally, construction companies are focused on mainly on productivity. So it's mainly productivity, it's the financials and so on. But what's happening now, I think, in the marketplace is that things are switching a little bit towards customer satisfaction. And it's been driven that way partly because of improved productivity and profitability, but mainly, I think, because of competitive advantage. So different construction companies want to ensure that they have happy customers. And in this world where everything gets a Google review, right? You want to get the best reviews from your customers, and the channels for those reviews to be passed on to your next prospective customer are ever changing. So it's always good to have those customers happy, and you want to track that happiness as well. So customer experience is something that is not, I think, that well developed in construction, but it's certainly coming up the agenda. Like we have, and going back to point, what does process automation have with all of this? I think process automation basically improves the level of productivity in the organization, but also the visible productivity that the customer is seeing. So the customer actually seeing the job being done better. They can actually see it. You're not just doing the job better, they can see the job being done better. And I think that's having a big difference. Like in one of our customers, they digitized over 40 processes in their organization, and they noticed a 50% reduction in customer complaints after doing that process automation. So it made a real difference that they could measure. Going back to Kai's point earlier, like you need to measure these things. They could see a clear reduction of 50% of customer complaints, and that makes a big difference in the perception of those customers of the service being delivered. So I think that was, if you like, not noted, I think, so much in construction in the past, but it's something that is increasingly important, that you deliver better customer experiences, you do better channel interactions, so you're allowing them to maybe become involved in your processes, becoming more part of your processes, so that they can interact with you directly via a website or whatever that means that is. But certainly customer experience is definitely having a bigger impact now, and process automation is a great way of making that customer experience better.
Thanks, Paul. Guys, would you have anything you'd like to add there?
Yeah, I think the kind of sooner and cheaper has always been the case in construction, although in recent times, I think that sort of the safer and happier is moving up the agenda. Although I think in terms of economics, the industry's not really figured out how to make that work. So it's sort of all good intentions, but very difficult to make it happen. But again, on a journey, moving in the right direction, be patient, all the points that we talked about earlier. I've noticed our user experience really traditionally in construction has been exceptionally low, especially with a lot of the tools that we use. You know, it's all about function. What can you put on the product sheet to kind of sell the tool, and then you pick it up.
Oh,
Like,
Kai, I
God,
think
I
your
hate this thing.
connection is just.
And that as a digital engineer, that oh my God, I hate this. That's been quite. Is
Sorry,
it flaking
Kai,
out?
we kind of lost you there for
Can you hear me
about
now? Or?
40 seconds. Yeah, we can hear you now.
I know. I don't know where you lost me, but that's all right.
No.
Anyway, I think construction's kind of being dragged by other industries. Can you hear me? Or?
Yeah, we can hear you, Kai.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know where you lost me. It's all right.
I'll
Go,
just,
Livimir.
sorry, there's a little lag in queuing. I'll just say that I agree with Kai. I think that process automation allows a certain level of let's say greater intimacy with the client. We are allowing him to be part of the process rather than building up this wall and perhaps just showing glimpses of what we would like the client to see. So there's a certain level of transparency that gets introduced, which then in turn I think it just increases the trust levels between construction companies and the clients that can result in obviously it can result in future work, but as I mentioned, this level of satisfaction of user experience is better, and there is a possibility of taking monitoring from the client side outside of just meetings, but there are actually apps and automated processes that can be client facing, and this really, I believe, makes our customer more involved with the process, and the level of satisfaction and keenness to go forward is ever increasing.
And Lubomir, is that something you're seeing more and more? Is that clients want to get involved and see regular updates, and it's an easier way to keep the communication flowing?
Absolutely, and there's always room for improvement, but this sort of even report automation is something that it's being looked at very much in depth, so that it's easier for the project team, who, as we've discussed, are always pressured with different problems every day, and having to report on another KPI and another sort of executive summaries that need to be provided is very time consuming and dwelling really for the team members. But through process automation, there is the possibility to make this process, to make it much more streamlined and just a much better, having it as a much better experience.
Great. Thank you so much, guys. So that's going to kind of wrap up the panel discussion. I think time has just flown by. But Paul, what we're going to do now is, I think we'll give you just around like under 10 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes, just, I know, really tight on time. I'm sorry, Paul. But I think the conversation was just flowing too well. I know we've chatted about process automation, but sometimes it's great to see a tool in action and to understand a little bit more about FlowForma. So Paul, I will pass it over to you for the next, as I said, 8 to 10 minutes, and then we will answer any questions at the end. So pop them in. I see we have a few in the chat already, so keep popping them in and we'll cover as many as we can at the end. So over to you, Paul.
Great. So I'll just tell you a little bit about FlowForma. We're an award-winning process automation provider. We're a no-code tool revolutionizing the traditional BPM space, which requires lots of technical skills. Our tool does not. And the whole idea is that people in the business can actually adopt the tool and start automating processes themselves. without support, without the need for support from IT resources, etc. So we've got over 200,000 people using us across the globe. Construction is our biggest sector, and we've got construction companies from small to large in many geographic locations. So just if you go next slide there. So just to explain briefly about the solution itself, the solution allows you to drive workflow, drive business processes, so that you're passing work from one person to the next to ultimately achieve your business goal. And in doing that, you're collecting data along the way. You'll automatically be collecting data in an electronic form. You're going to see that in a moment. And you're also managing documentation and communications as well as you run through the process to make the whole process run more effectively, seamlessly. There's lots of processes that can be digitized in FlowForma. It's not aligned to any particular process. You build it whatever you want. It's called a buy to build system. So you build whatever you want to make your resources work most effectively on your projects. Okay. So what we'll do now is maybe give you a quick demonstration. So worst if you can pass over control to me. That's great. So hopefully now, guys, you can see my screen. And what we're going to do is show you very, very quickly in a few minutes what FlowForma looks like. So here I've got some examples of some construction processes, and you'll see that I'm accessing the system via a web browser. So I can go in here, I can kick off some processes like a field change request, for example, and I can also see any processes that are waiting my attention. And down here now I have a report that's showing me some material requisition that are in various states of progress. But what I'm going to do is show you what a process looks like. So a typical end user is going to be accessing the system via a website, and they will go in and they will kick off a process. So let's kick off a safety observation here. And what does that look like? Well, it opens up as a form inside the browser. And what you can see is a set of tasks at the top. In this case, we just have one task to record the safety observation details. And then down below that, you can see an area where you can fill in some details. So imagine this is the first task in the process, and these are the details that need to be filled in. And this is being filled in this case, by a person sitting in front of with a laptop, let's say, or sitting in front of a desktop. And then key in some information. So the system pre-populates information, and the idea is that the system is very intuitive and easy to use, so that helps with adoption in the workforce, so that people out on the site, people in head office, etc., they can all access the same user interface and become very familiar with it, and it's very easy and intuitive to use. On your electronic forms, you can capture all sorts of information, and the forms are dynamic. As I said, it'll pre-populate information. It will be responsive to what you're selecting, and so on, and it will automatically allow you to automatically validate all the information that's being entered into your electronic form. It'll also give you some help that you can configure yourself to say, well, okay, here's what you need to do. Here are the forms, here's the details you need to fill in, here's the values that you should be setting, etc. So it has built-in help, which helps instruct people as to what to do next. Also, as you fill in the form, it analyzes what you're entering, and it can request you to enter more information. So for example, here, I have to describe the observation, describe the detail, and I may want to carry out follow-up action. And what that does then is it adds an additional task onto the workflow that says, hey, you've got to set up a follow-up action or respond to that. So the workflow is dynamic. So as people are carrying out the task, completing their information on the forms, the tasks themselves change based on the information entered. All the information that's been entered on this form is saved in a central database, so that you have that central database for reporting later on. And all these forms can be used by anybody inside your organization. So the idea is the more you digitize, the more data you collect, the more data is available for analytics to drive those decision making at the end of the day. Now, the form that we're seeing here, I'm just going to fill in a field here. It was designed to actually be run on a mobile device. And then when you fill it in on a mobile device, you can capture images, for example, from your camera and so on. In this case, I'm just going to capture an image from my my C drive here. I can annotate the image and so on. So this is just an example on a form. I'm racing through this, so bear with me. Just to give you an example of what a mobile interface support looks like, all the forms that you see on the desktop are also available on a mobile device. This is an Android phone emulator here, and this is what a safety observation report looks like on the Android phone emulator. As you can see, it looks very similar, and that's very deliberate. So our mobile interface looks very similar to the desktop, so that wherever you're using your forms, you're filling in your tasks, etc., they're actually using a very common, similar user interface. And that's very purposeful because it means that you can use the forms no matter where you are, and every form kind of looks the same. So that's very easy to adopt. Let me just cancel that there. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So if I close this down, so that was a safety observation report. Let's just very quickly look at another example. So let's look at a field change request. And what you see straight away is that even though this is a very different process, a field change request, safety observation, two very different processes, they actually look and behave in a very similar way. Again, here we have a series of steps in the process that are required to execute before your business, to achieve your business goal. You have some detail in here that you've got to capture. In this case, you've got to upload a design document. I'm going to upload it from my hard drive here, and then so you've got to process it through this series of steps. So if I submit this on, it moves on to the next logical step in the process. All these steps can be assigned to different resources in your organization, and gradually you complete them. And again, all of this information is being stored in that central database for reporting. So you know at any point in time what processes are running in your organization, where they are right now, and who owns them, who are they sitting with. So you can quickly see bottlenecks in your processes, analyze your processes, find out how efficient they are, and how you can improve them over time, and implement continuous improvement techniques to make your organization run better, run faster. Now that's what the system kind of looks like for an end user. Again, it's a very quick demonstration, so there's a lot more to talk about, but let's move on. And here's an example of what that field change request that we just looked at, what does it look like in our design tool? Now our design tool is key to the whole system. Why? Because the design tool allows people who don't understand IT to be able to build out solutions themselves. So what we're doing here is we have a series of steps in a process, and inside each step we have a series of details that we're capturing on the screen. And on the right hand side you see what that screen is going to look like to the end user. So as you're building out the steps and the data, if you like, on the left hand side, it's showing you what does that form look like to the end user. So to give you an example, if I want to add in a step to this field change request process, let's call it approval. I fill in a form, press OK, and then that step is automatically added into the end of the process. I drag it up, and then I can add it in, let's say maybe as the first step. And as you can see, it appears now on the step bar as the first step. If I click on the approval step, you'll see it has no data into it, but I want to add in a question. I want to say, please approve. And then I can specify that I want the answer to be a yes or a no. So down the end here, I'll find yes or no. And I want it mandatory, I want it to be entered. And here's the help text for that particular question. And press save, and then it automatically appears on the form here. And straight away, I can actually see that form in action. I can run a test form here and see what that form is actually going to look like to the end user. And I can see it, click yes or no, and so on. So this no-code tool allows you to very quickly build out solutions. This particular solution, the FCR, was created in less than an hour. And we have a webinar on our website that shows you that process being built from scratch in less than an hour. But the more important thing is, and this is going back to something that Kai mentioned very, very early on there, was that you can draft something out. You don't have to get it exactly right. You can draft the process out, draft out the steps, draft out the data, and then run it past the end users, run it past the people who are going to use it in the field, and get their feedback and see if it's right. And then quickly go in and add the missing step, add the missing piece of data, change the actual label on the field and so on, so that you can meet their exact requirements, and you can do this really quickly, really fast turnaround. So what this does is help people build out solutions really quickly that are adopted by the workforce. And by the way, as all those processes are being executed, there's a full audit trail behind it. So you know exactly how long things took, every single step in the process, so you can start analyzing the processes and start seeing where the bottlenecks are. Now again, I'm conscious that running out of time already. So what I'm going to very quickly finish on is our governance application. So our governance application allows you to control the building and release of solutions that are built by your business process owners. So by your people in the business, your site owners, etc. They can go out, build out the process, innovate safely in sandbox areas that you can control via a governance application. So they can do it safely in their own environments. And then once those processes are ready for the big time, you can go to request those processes to be promoted into the live environment. And then you can actually create a live environment, if you like, for every single project you have, and then process those new innovations into those projects. You can even set up a template set of processes that, if you like, are your company standard processes, and then move those into your new project, and then let the project modify their copies, if you like, of the processes to meet their own requirements, own specific project requirements. So this governance application is really quite unique in the marketplace, and it's very well suited to construction, where you tend to have lots of different projects, and all the projects tend to have slightly different processes, their variation based on their own set of resources, their own set of client requirements. Okay, so I think that's probably it for the demonstration, bearing in mind we don't have a lot of time. Maybe
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know you are so short on time there,
Yeah.
but I do want to get, I know we just have 5 minutes left for a really quick Q&A, but if people do want to see a more detailed demonstration, Paul, I'm sure you'd be more than happy to organize that. So feel free to reach out. At the end, I think we have a survey that comes up, so you can pop in a request there to see a more detailed demonstration if you'd like to. But sorry that was so rushed. We just have a couple of minutes for questions, so I might just pop through as many as we can get through quick, and maybe like a quick fire round. We'll make it a little bit fun. So the first one that came in, this one came in at around the time where Power BI was being asked, and Paul, maybe you can take this one. Someone is just wondering, can Power BI work alongside FlowForma?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So all the data that's collected in FlowForma can be routed out to a SQL database, and Power BI can just pull out that data, so you can use it for your real-time dashboards.
Great, thank you, Paul. Next question that came in is someone that is from the US. So hello, from the USA. They are asking, they are having issues kind of promoting digital transformation and process automation in the USA. And does anyone have any tips on how to progress that in their area? So I know we were talking about the UK being a little bit ahead of the curve, so someone in the US is confirming that. But does anyone have any like tips or ideas of how maybe they can promote it in their organization or in the wider construction industry in the US?
I'll start off. There is no magic solution to it. Unfortunately, everybody has a different approach to it and a different level of enthusiasm. I found that presentation of case studies is helpful. If the person is able to see a problem that they're facing being solved, then it's easier for them to visualize using that solution. And another thing I would say is just finding out what the actual issues are being had and address those, and trying to just address specific issues that arise.
Yeah, I would approach client groups to try and get adoption of the BIM standards. That's probably a nugget. I don't know if it'll work. I can't guarantee it.
Thank you. And I know where this is a part of London Build, but they do have a US Build and a Chicago Build as well, and physical and online events. So you might want to pass those on to your peers. They might learn something from that as well. Just a tip from a marketing point of view, I suppose. Another question is, so as a startup, how would you advise someone take on a process automation solution? Who would like to take that question?
Yeah, well, so go ahead, Luber.
I was just going to say that there is a benefit of being a startup, that there is a carte blanche, which allows to set up at the highest level the strategy for the process automation. Again, I would say is finding out what are the most common manual tasks that are being executed, and just looking at tackling these in the first instance, and setting up a wider strategy for going forward.
Great.
Yeah, I'd only add to say that there's with a cloud solution, it gives you the opportunity to start small. So as a startup, your resources might be limited, but with a no-code solution where you can actually build things very quickly, it's a great way to actually build something quickly that makes an impact and started off in a small way and roll the snowball as we talked about earlier on.
Yes. Well, guys, I suppose we have to leave it there. We are just on the button, but I really want to thank you all for your contribution today. It was a really brilliant discussion, and we will have a copy of the recording sent out to everyone. So if there's any nuggets of info there that you want to keep a hold of, you'll get a copy of that tomorrow. But Selena, I'll pass on to you to close out. But thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ursula, for moderating, Paul for your presentation, and of course to Lubomir and Kai for joining us as panelists. A big thank you once again to FlowForma for sponsoring the session, and of course to everyone in the audience that has tuned in today. So as Ursula mentioned, an on-demand copy of the session will be made available on the website and also a link sent to you via email. So thank you once again for joining us, and we hope to see you all at our live show, London Build, at Olympia London on November 16th and 17th. Thanks again.
Great. Thank you so
Thank you
much,
very much.
guys. Bye,
Take care,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye-bye.